a poem of parting and honoring and blessing for a significant soul brother of mine who has left the world today for a journey into the cosmos, into the great beyond. Fare thee well for Brad Hammer. Fare thee well, dear friend, dear man, rare man. Beloved brother, I and others have traveled, reveled with, so joyfully, so gratefully, these years, these seasons, evolutions. As you open your wings now to the wonder of a journey into the greater mystery, maybe the eternal harmony, unity, infinity of what lies beyond this mortal coil. The one you brought your best self, imperfectly perfect self to. This earthly soil of living and loving, your being grew so one of a kindly in and feelingly through. As you move to join, rejoin, the whirling, beckoning, soul-singing constellations, in a shower of star-dusted feelings, reveries, memories, as you lead the way for us someday to follow you, and sometime, glad time, meet you again, greet you there. As you head off and leave the starlight on for us, and we, dear friend, we who remain, leave the heart light on here. Till then, for you. Welcome to the latest floating poetry broadcast, and thank you for leaning in to the 104th show in my ongoing weekly series, coming to you live from the seagoing shores of Rhode Island. This is your poet and poetorialist, Colin Goedecke, a voice for living our days more poetically, more expressively, more soulfully. In broadcast 103, we dialed back to the times of our youth, revisited and reflected on dimensions of younger days, childhood, growing up, the joys, jolts, and journeys of being a boy or girl, a budding son, daughter, sibling, schoolgoer, innocent wanderer, and more. This week, a theme of farewell, of saying goodbye, so long, in word or heart or mind, to people, places, lives, or ways of life or thought, adieus and auf wiedersehens of all kinds. Through a sweet and bittersweet blend of poetry, cultural, and emotional inquiry and discovery together, that I hope touches meaningful chords within you. Why don't we start with Paul Blackburn's poem journal, April 19th, The Southern Tier. We're almost on that day. We're just one day off. I look out the window in upstate New York, see the Mediterranean stretching out below me down the rocky hillside at Faro, 3 years, 2 months, 14 days earlier, 8:25 a.m. Rosemary gone back to sleep, pink and white. I stand at the living room window drinking coffee, open the doors to the balcony, warmth beginning, though I wrap my hands around the cup, count fishing boats in the sun glare, moving shoreward now slowly or sitting there motionless on the flat sea. A fat blue arm stretches out from the coast, ripples where wind and currents show muscle below the blue skin of sea stretched out below me. The coffee's cold toward the end of the cup. I go back to the kitchen for more hot, Put orange in bathrobe pocket, reach for knife, return to the balcony with the fresh cup where the flat blue sea fills my eye and the sun glare stretches out below me. The southern tier, the maple outside the window warms in the early sun. Red buds at the ends of branches commence their slow bursting. Green soon. Joan moves her legs against mine in the hall, goes down to start my egg. Carlos thumps the lower stairs. We move. All our farewells already prepared inside us. All our deaths we carry inside us, double-yoked, the fragile toughness of the shell. It makes sustenance possible, makes love possible. As the red buds break against the sunlight, possible green, as legs move against legs, possible softnesses. The soft-boiled egg is ready now. Now we eat. Thank you, Paul Blackburn. Well, here in the Northeast, it's also goodbye to winter. And as we change gears and clothes into spring, it's a poem of mine for the spring equinox. It's called, from some years back, actually from 2018, When the Clock Strikes Spring. You stop, whatever you're doing. Take a long, deep breath, then another. Take off your shoes and socks or stockings. Take yourself out into the open air as it begins its softening, onto the outleafing earth as it begins its blossoming, under the lengthening sun as it begins its farewell to winter warming. Let all your senses feel the first notes, the fresh with promise notes of another greening time enter through your eyes and ears, nose, and skin, your stirring heart, unwinding mind, when the clock strikes spring. It was actually written out in Sag Harbor, New York, late March of that year. Well, we do have that iconic gesture, don't we? That universal gesture of waving to signal farewell. Of course, hello as well, but farewell, of small or large, but always kind ways, always friendly ways. Well, here's an expansive one that I came across by Elizabeth Spires, waving goodbye. The world bends us to its purpose. In the public gardens, we found a, quote, gazing globe balanced on a waist-high pedestal, a silver ball a foot in circumference, reflecting sky and ground, ourselves as we stood above it. We stared into its depths, as in a crystal ball, our faces large and wild, arms and legs unnaturally small, as if a spell were on the world. Or finally, we clearly saw the world for what it was, too brightly shining, circular, unadorned. Trees bent toward us, mere shadows of themselves, their shadows more substantial than the trees themselves. The sky at 1 o'clock, a milky white, light-filled, yet without sun or cloud, and beds of tulips rising from the groundswell, each one a little mouth. I knelt beside you on one knee, caught up in walls of air I couldn't touch or see, the outer world around me wavering as on a hot summer day. We looked out to the future, our future selves. You stood dead center in the globe and raised your hand to stop the scene, your palm enlarging until it dwarfed the tallest trees. Then, waving goodbye, we walked, as a joke, backward and away, farther and farther away, the globe still gazing on us, leaving ourselves behind to live forever in that silver room, to watch and spy on lovers like ourselves. Thank you, Elizabeth Spires. Gerald Stern has a different poem, but with the same title, Waving Goodbye. I wanted to know what it was like before we had voices and before we had bare fingers and before we had minds to move us through our actions and tears to help us over our feelings. So I drove my daughter through the snow to meet her friend and filled her car with suitcases and hugged her as an animal would, pressing my forehead against her, walking in circles, moaning, touching her cheek, and turned my head after them as an animal would, watching helplessly as they drove over the ruts, her smiling face and her small hand just visible over the giant pillows and coat hangers as they made their turn into the empty highway. Thank you, Gerald Stern. Here's Robin Robertson's poem, The Fisherman's Farewell. Their long stares mark them apart, eyes gone to sea colors, gray, foam-flecked, and black in the undertow, blue as the blue banners of the mackerel whipping west. On land, they are smoke walkers, where each stone is a standing stone, every circle a stone circle. They would be rumor if they could, in this frozen landscape like a stopped sea, from the great stone keels of Callanish to the walls of Dunatar and Drum. They would be less even than rumor, to be ocean stealers, to never throw a shadow, to dream the blank horizon and dread this sight of land. The drink storms through these men encompasses them till they're all at sea again, their houses heeled over in the sand, each ruin now a cairn for kites. And down by the quay, past empty pots, unmended nets and boats, this tiny bar where men sleep upright in their own element as seals. Thank you, Robin Robertson, The Fisherman's Farewell, which made me think of Herman Melville and the song about Farewell to the Ladies of Spain. And back in 1810 was Tom Deadlight. It's during a tempest encountered homeward bound from the Mediterranean a grizzled petty officer, one of the two captains of the forecastle, dying at night in his hammock, swung in the sick bay under the tiered gun decks of the British Dreadnought 98, wandering in his mind, though with glimpses of sanity and starting up at whiles, sings by snatches his goodbye and last injunctions to two messmates, his watchers, one of whom fans the fevered tar with the flap of his old sou'wester. Some names and phrases, with here and there a line or part of one, these, in his aberration, wrested into incoherency from their original connection and import he involuntarily derives, as he does the measure, from a famous old sea ditty, whose cadences, long rife and now humming in the collapsing brain, attuned the last flutterings of distempered thought. Well, here's the opening of that, opening lines. Farewell and adieu to you, noble hearties. Farewell and adieu to you, ladies of Spain. For I've received orders for to sail for the dead man, but hope with the grand fleet to see you again. Thank you, Melville. It's a wonderful song. You may also remember, I think, in Jaws, the old fishing captain sings that to the other fellows on the boat in one scene. Yeah. Well, here's a different one, different ditty by another stripe by Roger Mitchell, Fisherman's Ditty. Goodbye to the little yard full of clover and crabgrass, the sagging carport and the neighbors. Farewell to the rabbi who ate nothing but pizza, to splitting wood in the driveway on a portable stump, which the neighbors watched from the shadows in back of their kitchens as I brought the maul down on a life that was hardly a life at all, but a series of internal negotiations over which of us put out the most orderly incumbent trash of the week. It was a life I asked for and loved and never knew why it never seemed to be mine, but a wave that washed over me, my head full of voluptuous seaweed, shipwreck and foam. Believe me, I love to lie here singing this fisherman's ditty, a bit of rope in my hands for practicing my knots, mind loosened by grog, whine of the squeeze-box, wheeze of the salts cantering out onto the deck under the stars. Beneath the tune, unmistakable and huge, the seas heave. Thank you, Roger Mitchell. David Mason, In the Mushroom Summer, a poem, I would say, for me, in part about letting go of grief, of deeper sadness. Colorado turns Kyoto in a shower. Mist in the pines so thick the crows delight, or seem to, winging in obscurity. The ineffectual panic of a squirrel who chattered at my passing gave me pause to watch his ponderosa come and go. Long needles scratching cloud. I'd summited, but knew it only by the wildflower meadow, the muted harebells, paintbrush, gentian, scattered among the loca weed and sage, Today my grief abated like water soaking underground, its scar a little path of twigs and needles winding ahead of me downhill to the next bend. Today I let the rain soak through my shirt and was unharmed. Thank you, David Mason. And around childhood is Marilyn Callett's poem, Kallet, Fireflies. In the dry summer field at nightfall, fireflies rise like sparks. Imagine the presence of ghosts flickering, the ghosts of young friends, your father nearest in the distance. This time they carry no sorrow, no remorse. Their presence is so light. Childhood comes to you, memories of your street and lamplight, holding those last moments before bed, capturing lightning bugs, with a blossom of the hand, letting them go. Lightness returns, an airy motion over the ground you remember from Ring Around the Rosie. If you stay, the fireflies become fireflies again, not part of your stories, as unaware of you as sleep, being beautiful and quiet all around you. Thank you, Marilyn Callett, for that. Well, dear listeners, I have some questions about your farewells, your partings, or of joyful or mournful or other kinds. What was one or more of the most poignant or resonant farewells you had to make or experience or witness? What about exuberant bon voyages you gave to others or were given to you around some literal voyage, some journey of note? Are there significant things you've had to say goodbye to in your life, recently or back in time, or are pondering taking leave of now? Maybe old vows you made, or ideas or beliefs about self or life, or ways of thinking or living that are outworn or somehow no longer serve you, or understandings you held fast onto about the world around you. If you could choose the ideal last hurrah for yourself, what might that look and sound and feel like? And for your final appearance, your swan song, your last bow before your disappearance, what might your farewell address or last words to everyone you know and love be? Mary Morris has this poem, Moving to Santa Fe. I packed my boxes, beat the tornado. My brother followed in his truck with my bed and books of photos. Goodbye, father and mother, 7 brothers who fed us wild animals. Farewell to the stone house strangled with red dirt, rose rocks, green hills, and burnt grass. I will miss you, armadillos and hairy hands of tarantulas crossing the road in the dark. Farewell, friends. I'm not far. Visit me in my mud house under the shadow of the mesa. Bring me peaches. Moving to Santa Fe, Mary Morris, thank you. Poem by Cynthia Rylant, Wax Lips, from her collection Waiting to Waltz. Todd's hardware was dust and a monkey, a real one, on the second floor, and Mrs. Todd there behind the glass cases. We stepped over buckets of nails and lawnmowers to get to the candy counter in the back and pointed at the red wax lips and Mary Jane's and straws full of purple sugar. Said goodbye to Mrs. Todd, she white-faced and silent, and walked the streets of Beaver, our teeth sunk hard in the wax and big red lips worth kissing. Thank you, Cynthia Rylant. And here's one by Linda Pastan, Grudnow. When he spoke of where he came from, my grandfather could have been clearing his throat of that name. That town sometimes Poland, sometimes Russia, the borders penciled in with a hand as shaky as his. He left, I heard him say, because there was nothing there. I understood what he meant when I saw the photograph of his people standing against a landscape emptied of crops and trees, scraped raw by winter. Everything was in sepia, as if the brown earth had stained the faces, stained even the air. I would have died there, I think, in childhood, maybe, of some fever, my face pressed for warmth against a cow with flanks like those of the great aunts in the picture. Or later I would have died of history like the others, who dug their stubborn heels into that earth, heels as hard as the heels of the bread my grandfather tore from the loaf at supper. He always sipped his tea through a cube of sugar clenched in his teeth, the way he sipped his life here, noisily, through all he remembered that might have been sweet in Grudnow. Thank you, Linda Pastan. And friends, what of the tearful, grateful goodbyes we have had for beloved pets, animals, cats, dogs, horses, other pets, who had a special place in our days and hearts. I've had my experiences, and maybe you've had yours. Well, here's a poem I wrote for a great friend and a mentor on the loss of his most faithful companion, last one. It's called Lucy in the Sky. And I sort of riffed a bit on the Beatles song, Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. That sort of rhythm. You picture yourself in your chair by the ocean with deep pine green trees and deep Maine blue skies. A small voice now calls you. You look over slowly to a dog with such animate eyes. Day-shaped good feelings of autumn and summer float in through the windows and in through your mind as you look for that dog who sat by you so sweetly, the one with the sun in her eyes. Lucy in the Sky, your old friend. You'd walk her on down to a dock on the harbor, where freewheeling people ate lobsters and fries. Everyone smiled as you strolled past the waters that flowed oh so beautifully by. Now a trusty old ferry appears at the shoreline, ready to take you away on the tide. You climb aboard with your eyes on the cloud banks and see your dear Lucy up there in the sky, your old friend with the animate eyes. Well, I came across a very interesting poem, and it's about the elegy to the Sioux, the native First Peoples. Norman Dubie wrote this, D-U-B-I-E. So, well, that opens a whole territory of thought and feeling about the First Peoples, the Native Americans who were here before the rest of us, and those who have not vanished or have been greatly diminished. So this was very poignant to me. Elegy to the Sioux. The vase was made of clay with spines of straw for strength. The sun-baked vase soaked in a deep blue dye for days. The events in this wilderness, portrayed in the round of the vase, depend on shades of indigo against the masked areas of the clay, a flat pearl color to detail the big sky and snow. This Montana field in winter is not sorrowful. A bugle skips through notes. We view it all somehow from the center of the field, and there are scattered groups of cavalry. Some of these men were seasoned by civil war. Their caps are blue, their canteens are frozen, the horses shake their heads, bothered by beads of ice, the needles of ice forming at both sides of their great anvil heads. The long blue cloaks of the officers fall over the haunches of the horses. The ammunition wagons beside the woods are blurred by the snowy weather. Beyond the wagons, farther even, into the woods, there is a sloping stream bed. This is the dark side of the vase, which is often misunderstood. From here, through the bare trees, there's a strange sight to be seen at the very middle of the field. A valet is holding a bowl of cherries. Archetype and rubric, a general with white hair eats the fruit while introducing its color, which will flow through the woods in early December. An Indian woman came under dark clouds to give birth, unattended, in the deep wash inside the woods. She knew the weather could turn and stake the tips of 2 rooted spruce trees to the earth to make a roof. The deerskin of her robe is in her mouth. Her legs spread, her feet are tied up in the roof of darkening spruce. No stars show through. But on the vase that belonged to a president, there are countless stars above the soldiers' campfires. With rawhide, her feet are tied high in the spruce, and her right hand is left loose as if she were about to ride a wild stallion to its conclusion in a box canyon. President Grant drinks bourbon from his boot. The Sioux cough in their blankets. It snowed an hour more, and then the moon appeared, the unborn infant, almost out on the forest floor, buckled and lodged. It died. Its mother died. Just before she closed her eyes, she rubbed snow up and down inside of her bare thighs. In the near field of an idle, stylish horse raised one leg to make a perfect right angle. Just then a ghost of snow formed over the tents of the soldiers. It blows past the stylish gray horse. Unstopped, it moves through woods, up the stream bed, and passes to the crude spruce shelter, into the raw open woman, her legs raised into sky, naked house of snow and ice. This gust of wind spent the night within the woman. At sunrise it left her mouth, tearing out trees, keeping the owls from sleep. It was angry now, and into the field it spilled, to the bivouac of pony soldiers who turned to the south, who turned back to the woods, who became still, blue all over. If there is snow still unspooling in the mountains, then there is time yet for the president to get his Indian vase and to fill it with bourbon from his boot and to put flowers into it. The flowers die in a window that looks out on a cherry tree, which heavy with fruit drops a branch, torn to its very heartwood. By the red clusters of fruit, the branch fell, like her leg and foot, out of the sky into Montana. Thank you, Norman Doobie, for that. I spoke at the opening about saying goodbyes to people and things of many kinds by choice or circumstance or happenstance. And around this, parting ways with whatever no longer belongs in your life, our life, or inside our being. This is a poem called So Long to Everything Unholy, W-H-O-L-L-Y. To fractional relationships, where the one you even greatly love is rarely or not really all there. To factional relationships, where the one you're in life with rigidly or frigidly splinters off. To frictional relationships, where whatever greater goodness was found chafes and frays away. To fictional relationships, where all that makes the story stop or go on is make-believe. Farewell to everything and everyone unwilling or undesiring to be, to become whole. Tony Hoagland, Hoagland, has this piece. There is no word. There isn't a word for walking out of the grocery store with a gallon jug of milk in a plastic sack that should have been bagged in double layers, so that before you were even out the door, you feel the weight of the jug dragging the bag down, stretching the thin plastic handles longer and longer, and you know it's only a matter of time until bottom suddenly splits. There is no single unimpeachable word for that vague sensation of something moving away from you as it exceeds its elastic capacity, which is too bad because that is the word I would like to use to describe standing on the street chatting with an old friend, as the awareness grows in me that he is no longer a friend, but only an acquaintance, a person with whom I never made the effort until this moment, when as we say goodbye, I think we share a feeling of relief, a recognition that we have reached the end of a pretense, though to tell the truth, what I already am thinking about is my gratitude for language, how it will stretch just so much and no farther, how there are some holes in it it will not cover up, but how it will move, if not inside, then around the circumference of almost anything. How, over the years, it has given me back all the hours and days, all the plodding love and faith, all the misunderstandings and secrets I have willingly poured into it. Thank you, Tony Hoagland. And another one of mine on a related note, what would you say to a figurative spring cleaning? Letting go to let in. This is a spring cleaning, a spring of life cleaning, a natural time to air and clear out everything unneeded. Everything every one outworn, unserving, undeserving of being held on to jettison the deadening thought and leaden weight of all the truly unnecessary, the clearly non-essential, to make ample, fruitful room for the most meaningful, for the must-haves, create deep breathing room for all the must-be's. Spring cleaning. Years back, I, like others, had to make a farewell deep inside myself to the leaving of a great love and all the joy and beauty and bounty of it. And some of us have gone through that at least once, if not more times, or may. And this is a poem called Losing the Flow, and the poem is for the soul. Mine, of course, or any soul like this. For one who bathed body and spirit in its free-form currents, breathed in its fresh rushings, who lived and fished, loved and dreamt for lyrical years along its soft green banks, losing the flow, the natural course, wild coursing of a great river, comes as a bewildering surprise. You watch, amazed, dazed as the water recedes, then how you begin to devitalize like the earth before you that dries and cracks. Witness the water flowers wither, the birds and fish disappear, taking their bright songs and buoyant gestures with them. Feel a gnawing dispiriting take hold, a growing emptiness you can't reverse. Experience your once flush, daily quenched feelings of desire, delight, wane, drain away like the whole vanishing river. You hang on, try to, for a time, caught in the loss, held in a hard press of longing, disbelieving, until the last remaining hope of this dear river's return evaporates. And you gather your parched, puzzled self and depart to seek out a new oasis, a life-giving source of another, even if lesser kind, to flow through the next seasons of your life, to keep your body, your soul likewise vitally streaming, and ever moving, ever dreaming toward the sea. There's a lovely song by Randy Newman. It's always often in my head, not always, but often. It's from 2008, and I didn't actually know the genesis of the song, but when I went back to look up the lyrics, his inspiration for it came from the story told to him by his brother, who's an oncologist, about a family that lost their 20-year-old child. It's called Losing You. So, just inviting you to go listen to that song. I won't tell you more about it. Maybe it'll be a surprise, a good surprise. As I thought along, and you may be thinking along the same way as this territory of people from the past who are springing to mind, even as we're sharing this evening, this time, that have since passed on out of life, of course, very freshly, like my dear friend this very day. And this, like the father of another great friend, Andy Reid. I wrote this back in June of 2013 in New York City. It was for the passing of his father, Bruto Reid, or his nickname was Bruto. And it's called Hail and Farewell. He was very emblematic, that figure, this fellow. To that great Gatsby gent I first met on a dark lawn, cooled with night air and starlight, standing, savoring the fine evening with a blue-pluming cigarette and smoking jacket, savoring his country kingdom. To that old-school gent, sailed off now into those stars, into a greater lightness, into a greater peacefulness. Hail and farewell. In the Marginalian, I found some anecdotes about, it's called Hello, Goodbye, Hello, Rudyard Kipling meets Mark Twain meets Helen Keller, from the book, which I actually don't have, but I'd like to have. Hello, Goodbye, Hello, a circle of 101 remarkable meetings, an enchanting daisy chain of true encounters spanning more than a century of cultural heroes and some villains, from Freud to Tchaikovsky to Hitchcock to Hitchens. spanning science, literature, art, music, film, politics, and more, culled by British writer Craig Brown from diaries, personal correspondence, and various other historical ephemera. But the part I liked was Helen Keller meeting back in time Mark Twain in 1909. She visited him, but the years up to that point, he had lost a daughter. His wife had died, and so there was a lot of sadness in him, and she sensed that. And she said at that time there was about him the air of one who had suffered greatly. Whenever I touched his face, his expression was sad, even when he was telling a funny story. He smiled not with the mouth, but with his mind, a gesture of the soul rather than of the face. He seemed to have absorbed all America into himself. The great Mississippi River seemed forever flowing through his speech, through the shadowless white sands of thought. His voice seemed to say, like the river, "Why hurry? Eternity is long. The ocean can wait." Well, as she says goodbye, right here, Helen wonders if they will ever meet again. Once more, her intuition proves right. Twain dies the following year. So I'm going to get that book. Maybe you are too. And we have, I was thinking of all kinds of last words, and I was curious what some of those might be out there from the past. Interesting people. I chose a few, just a couple, from thoughtco.com. Humphrey Bogart in 1957. Of course, the Hollywood icon was America's leading man for decades. He stole hearts in classic movies like The Maltese Falcon, Casablanca. Surprising is that at the time of his death, he weighed a mere 80 pounds, and though suffering from cancer of the esophagus, he still joked as he fell into a coma and said, "I should never have switched from scotch to martinis." And John Barrymore, 1942, was a Hollywood actor, best known for his roles in light comedies, lived a very grand life worthy of a star. Thus, the idea of death was far too simple a concept to end his life, and at the end he said, "Die? I should say not, dear fellow. No Barrymore would allow such a conventional thing to happen to him." Well, if you've seen any of the Barrymores from the old films, you could imagine that coming out of his mouth. I have a poem of So Long for my mother, Maureen, my green-eyed mother, back in 1997. It's called Mom. You took off with surprise in your eyes, holding on to your halo, heading for beyond. No time for goodbyes, farewells, or swan songs, or even one long sigh. Don't worry. Without a doubt, you'll blow out those 100 birthday candles somewhere, and I'll sing you a shower of pennies from heaven while your white umbrella is upside down. Mom. David Lehman has goodbye instructions. They're real. Those angels you spent half your life searching for are real. You decided. Isn't that enough? And they're surrounding the bed, just as they're supposed to at night, escorting your last nightmare away. They're happiest at night. You can see them at night. They want to be seen. And yet, even you had to forsake them at dawn, when with one eye closed you comprehended the full of the sun with the other, and all that remained was their singing and white dancing, which you composed. Your friends looked on, the ones you always wrote about, so that in the future each would say, "He saw angels." Thank you, David Lehman. I was intrigued by Ilana Bell's poem, Elegy for Mother, Still Living. I was formed inside the body of a woman who wanted me as she wanted her own life, allowed to drink the milk made only for me. I was given mother love, its bounty and its cocoon of those first years without language. It is right to mourn the rocky hills of Crete where we walked, my small hand in hers for hours. The hidden beach where we swam naked, then baked on a fine sand. Lazy afternoons in her lap, her thick hand stroking my curls. Her fingers have stiffened, her eyes, the eyes of an animal in pain. I hold my mother against the woman she is. Thank you, Ilana Bell. Well, I don't know if you can hear the coyotes out there, but they're starting. that's them. Some nights they're quite loud, and I'm tempted to go out, but I'm probably not a good idea to get too close to them. Okay. I knew Mary Oliver would have something fitting for us this show, this theme. Song for Autumn. Don't you imagine the leaves dream now how comfortable it will be to touch the earth instead of the nothingness of the air and the endless freshets of wind? And don't you think the trees, especially those with mossy hollows, are beginning to look for the birds that will come, 6 a dozen, to sleep inside their bodies? And don't you hear the goldenrod whispering goodbye, the everlasting being crowned with the first tuffets of snow? The pond stiffens, and the white field over which the fox runs so quickly brings out its long blue shadows. The wind wags its many tails, and in the evening the piled firewood shifts a little, longing to be on its way. It's a poem from Kitchell Pond, Lewantaka Brook Reservation, September 2016. Though so much life may have gone by, so much loving, discovering, laughing, and dreaming, desiring, perspiring, dancing, creating, wandering, and wondering, through decades or more of moments that lasted a moment, others that may have touched infinity. Maybe the party is just getting started, a different party altogether, a freeing fiesta of body, of beauty, spirit, and song, flowing with enough joy to last well past the rest of this lifetime, to toast and feast on for the best of a brightly lit new lifetime. As we come to the last few sharings, dear listeners, when you ponder eternity, what images or feelings arise for you? This is a poem called Eternity Leave. 1 minute you're here, then gone in a puff of what was all possibility and potential, realized and not, and endless practicality when you take your leave to slip off into eternity. I was thinking of another song as well. The British torch singer Vera Lynn sang, made it famous. She sang it in 1939. I invite you to maybe find it out there on the internet, Spotify or Pandora, or wherever you listen. It's one of the most famous of the Second World War era songs, and resonated with soldiers going off to fight, as well as their families and sweethearts. And here are the lyrics. We'll meet again, don't know where, don't know when, but I know we'll meet again some sunny day. Keep smiling through just like you always do, till the blue skies drive the dark clouds far away. So will you please say hello to the folks that I know? Tell them I won't be long. They'll be happy to know that as you saw me go, I was singing this song. We'll meet again, don't know where, don't know when, but I know we'll meet again some sunny day. Well, a question of a poem for you, for each of us. If you had to close the book, if you had to close the book of your life, prepare for an otherworldly fuga mundi. Ready or not, here you go, forevermore. What would the last page, the end note, grace note be? The luminous face or close embrace of a great love? A simple, blissful childhood reverie? The first crisp taste of autumn at the green end of summer? And what table of its contents would you expose, to mark out the main chapters, the major chords, depth and breadth between birth and death of your living and loving, your seeking and discovering, if you knew you had to close the book? Next to last, this poem by John Koth, In the Park. This is the life I wanted and could never see. For almost 20 years I thought that it was enough, that real happiness was either unreal or lost or endless, and that remembrance was as close to it as I could ever come. And I believed that deep in the past, buried in my heart beyond the depth of sight, there was a kingdom of peace. And so I never imagined that when peace would finally come, it would be on a summer evening, a few blocks away from home, in a small suburban park, with some children playing aimlessly in an endless light and a lake shining in the distance. Eventually, sometime around the middle of your life, there's a moment when the first imagination begins to wane. The future that had always seemed so limitless dissolves, and the dreams that used to seem so real float up and fade. The years accumulate, but they start to take on a mild, human tone beyond imagination, like the sound the heart makes pouring into the past its hymns of adoration and regret. And then gradually the moments quicken into life, vibrant with possibility, sovereign, dense, serene. And then the park is empty, and the years are still. I think the saddest memory is of a kind of light, a kind of twilight that seemed to permeate the air for a few years after I'd grown up and gone away from home. It was limitless and free. And of course I was going to change, but freedom means that only aspects ever really change, and that as the past recedes and the future floats away, you turn into what you are. And so I stayed basically the same as what I'd always been, while the blonde light in the trees became part of my memory, and my voice took on the accents of a mind infatuated with the rhetoric of farewell. And now that disembodied grief has gone away. It was a flickering, literary kind of sadness, the suspension of a life between two other lives of continual remembrance, between two worlds in which there's too much solitude, too much disdain. But the sadness that I felt was real sadness, and this elation now a real tremor as the deepening shadows lengthen upon the lake. This calm is real, but how much of the real past can it absorb? How far into the future can this peace extend? I love the way the light falls over the suburbs late on these summer evenings, as the buried minds stir in their graves, their hearts swell in the warm earth, and the soul settles from the air into its human home. This is where the prodigal began, and now his day is ending in a great dream of contentment, where all night long the children sleep within tomorrow's peaceful arms, and the past is still, and suddenly we turn around and smile at the memory of a vast, inchoate dream of happiness, now that we know that none of it is ever going to be. Don't you remember how free the future seemed when it was all imagination? It was a beautiful park where the sky was a page of water, and when we looked up, there were our own faces shimmering in the clear air. And I know that this life is the only real form of happiness, but sometimes in its midst I can hear the dense, stifled sob of the unreal one we might have known. And when that ends and my eyes are filled with tears, time seems to have stopped, and we are alone in the park, where it is almost 20 years ago, and the future is still an immense, open dream. Thank you, John Koth. And to close for now this time of ours together, I had opened with a farewell poem, a fare thee well poem to a cherished friend. And this was an October 2020 poem for another one, a marvelous man, spirit, professor, dearly loved. That a poem that I sent to his wife to read to him just before he died. And she received it, and she read it to him, and he passed away. Very shortly thereafter, quite shortly. So this is for Jonathan Javelo. Auf Wiedersehen, Herr Professor, dear brother, fellow wanderer. As you set sail on a great next adventure, as your first matter is transmuted into the rarest of all forms, all light. I'll meet you in eternity, and till then will keep you in my molecules, most alive in my memories, deeply felt in my reveries of we fellows so well met, What energies singing and dancing, musing and amusing together here on earth. And myself, on our parting, for a while, wildly grateful for the love and grandest gift of you. Auf Wiedersehen. Well, thank you again, each and all, for leaning in, floating in, and feeling in, and for your appreciations of all kinds. If you'd like to offer a kudo or comment or question about this or another broadcast, I'd be glad to have it. My email is colin@thepoetorialist.com. If you want to express your thanks with a contribution, I'd be doubly glad, as they help me continue creating these weekly shows. You can contribute by Venmo to fivefold, Fivefold, at pipeline.com, or by PayPal, or directly through my site, thepoetorialist.com, and the Donate tab. Or simply by mail to me at P.O. Box 1032, Westerly, Rhode Island, 02891. Any patron open to hosting me as a working artist, a poet in residence on a given property for a given time, late this spring, summer, or fall, to create a new flight of poetic art dedicated to you, kindly reach out and let's discuss the possibilities. I also welcome invitations to be a virtual artist in residence, a poetic presence for an online community. Meanwhile, you can hear all the broadcasts online, on YouTube, on the Floating Poetry playlist. I hope you'll lean in again, soon again. Until then, dear listeners, fellow contemplators and discoverers, here's to bringing your whole self, your best and deepest self, spirit, to every place of farewell in your life, whatever and whoever your goodbyes may be for now or later. For these moments are rare opportunities to sense in and express from every molecule of your being, of our beings, things gently or immensely poignant, and sometimes beyond profound. Goodbye. Goodbye for now, and good spirits.